I grew up here in Austin, but always had a lifelong goal of living on an island at some point and found myself down in the British Virgin Islands. And it was a time of reinvention for me. I had gone through a divorce and it was my first time really being an individual. I had an aha moment on the sailboat one day where it hit me the gravity of the fact that on my lunch break from my job, I could go free diving into these schools of bait fish, like hundreds of thousands of these fish.
Hi, Shelby. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Mark?
Fantastic. Welcome to the show. I've been waiting to talk to you. You have a career now where you are a cinematographer. You are working with tech founders, entrepreneurs, telling an amazing visual story about their life. But not many years ago, you were on a yacht working as a chef. Tell us about that.
Beat up about 12 years ago. I grew up here in Austin, but always had a lifelong goal of living on an island at some point and found myself down in the British Virgin Islands. And it was a time of reinvention for me. I had gone through a divorce and it was my first time really being an individual. And so I worked on term charter yachts. So we pick up guests and we island hop for 8 days straight. And it was a new beginning for me. And I was so excited I never thought that my world would look like seeing the above sea level and below sea level world so vividly and making so many sweet memories with families.
Wow, wow. I'm sure it was quite an adventure. What happened? You were there, you're enjoying life. You've obviously gone through a difficult phase in your life with a divorce. You are in the ocean making food, like life is good. What was that moment where you realized maybe I'm meant for something else? Maybe this is just a vacation. My real life belongs somewhere else.
Yeah, I had an aha moment on the sailboat one day where it hit me the gravity of the fact that on my lunch break from my job, I could go free diving into these schools of bait fish, like hundreds of thousands of these fish. And it was like before Aquaman. And I just realized this is really precious and I want to remember this. I may not always have this access forever. And we had an ancient GoPro on the boat and it had the waterproof housing and I didn't really know how to use it, but I turned it on and I got my snorkel gear on and my fins and I just dove in the water and started filming like Superman, just going over brain coral, and I got lost in it. I had so much fun. And the real moment for me was coming back on the boat after dinner service, fumbling my way through the, again, dinosaur of a computer on the boat and fussing with not GarageBand, but iMovie, the OG of video editing. And I just stumbled my way through video editing and going through these clips and I edited it to my favorite song. And I stayed up all night and I am not a night owl, but I lost myself in getting to replay these moments and have more detail and slow down. And so when we dropped our guests off at the end of that week, I had a big premiere party, of course, to my amateur 5 minute, way too long freediving video. And I had all my friends come on the boat and all the chefs. We always bring leftovers at the end of charters. So people are bringing wings or they've got some really nice pasta. And we had a premiere party. And that was my first debut as a filmmaker. But what hit me was I loved it because they were such precious moments to me. It was one of my favorite places that we take guests scuba diving and free diving. But over time, other people with other yachts would say, hey, can you come on our sailboat and track with our crew for a day? Can you do those highlight videos with our boat? And it began to build demand. So speed that up to where I'm juggling these two different worlds. When I moved back to the US, back to the States, I could either open a restaurant or do something with video. And I didn't like that on my lunch breaks, I couldn't jump into cerulean blue water. So I went the route of film and I had no idea what I was doing.
So that's very interesting, right? Because there's two things that I note about you right off the bat. Even when you are telling me the story of being on a break, jumping in the water, swimming to the ocean, the way you speak, it almost paints a visual image of what you're telling me. I can watch what you're saying. So I don't know if this is just naturally how you speak or if this is something that you have developed, that you're just applying naturally to filmmaking, that you're a very, I don't know what the storytelling, it's a visual storytelling for me, like with your words I can watch it. Have you always been that way?
Yes, when I was in school, I studied fine art. So the concept of being able to convey a story through a still image, through a drawing, my English writing teachers all thought that I took drugs in my adolescence, which I did not. I did not. And because I would just come up with such imaginative plots. And they were like, what are you on to come up with this for the creative writing? So you could say I've always been able to create a moment.
The moment. I love it. And the second thing is visual storytelling, cinematography. These days, with a with a great phone, everybody with a camera thinks that they're a cinematographer, right? But that's not the truth, especially for someone at your level. What is it about the story-driven narrative that you're telling behind even the simplest of things that you think separates the story you are telling from what someone else is telling?
I can just tie it into when I first started creating brand narratives. I thought the goals we needed to convey in 5 minutes originally was who, what, where, when, why, how. And for products, it was just how do people get your product? As that progressed, as social media began to advance in the way that it has, people's attention spans have become finite. It needed to be something deeper that stop people in their tracks. So what I have found is often working with brand stories is it's going back to the why of the founder or the function of it and immersing into what is that life that generated that product and telling that story.
So if you were making a story on your life, what was the why behind creating the company you have?
Ooh, the first thing that comes to mind is so we have the word riot in our name, Ruby Riot Creatives. And when we rebranded in 2019, there was 4 of us on staff. We're all brainstorming. And the one thing that we all had in common was we went through that punk rock preteen into early teenage years where you just question everything. You want every tattoo you could possibly get, every nose piercing. I wanted dreadlocks so bad. My mom threatened to shave my head if I came home with them. So we just had this anti-establishment question, why are things the way they've always been? So I think that when it comes to Ruby Riot Creatives, when it comes to the way we tell stories, I love to provoke and ask disruptive questions because I think that gives a lot of fresh air to people. I think we're really tired of hearing the same jargon, the same influencer culture, the same, you should do this to be successful. And if you aren't doing this, then that must mean you're that. And I think people are just over it. So I think that it ties into how do you tell a story worth telling?
How do you tell a story worth telling? I love it. Here's the thing. If you were working with Indiana Jones types of adventurers who are going into the mountain and fighting a bear, that's such different type of story than the audience that you've chosen to work with. You've chosen to work with tech founders and founders of companies who, in my previous life, I was a professional consultant. We sit at a desk and we just do stuff. There's like a lot of adventure happening in our daily life. How do you pull the story out of just what seems like a mundane office job?
Beautiful question, Mark. I think that it lies in diving into the individual and humanizing what is the product, what is the company. And a superpower that I like to bring to the table is, yes, you're going to answer the functions of how your managed services, they trump your competition through this unique value proposition. But what I want to know, what makes you tick? And I think a lot of other people are curious of those same nuances. So I love to get into the granular level of hearing about people's quirks. That's the easiest way I can tie into in the tech space, in some of the brands that we work with, where yeah, on paper it's not sexy. It's not something that looks fabulous or glamorous. Until I find out that the CEO has an Ashtanga yoga practice and is so proud of his headstand that we need to get him in the middle of a shoot and incorporate that into our shot list, and just finding those nuances of what makes each person in an organization unique and brilliant in their own way. And we've done a lot of writing around let your freak flag fly. What are the things? How are you a nerd? How are you? What are the silly, goofy, geeky things you do? Because everybody is a geek at heart. And if they're not, they're very boring. So it's finding the details of what motivates the people in an organization and help to showcase that passion. People respond to passion.
And it's such a unique way of going about things because life in a world of bare minimum, when you hire a videography team, a cinematography team to be able to come and just video and showcase your company, I can literally see the movie they're making and I'm already falling asleep imagining the
Yes.
movie they're making. Whereas you are
Yes.
not only taking the step above and beyond, you're going one step beyond above and beyond to really drill deep into the person behind the image of a CEO or whatever, right? But why? Is it just because it's a smart business decision, but nobody else is doing it? Or is there something within you that makes you want to dig deeper than the surface level?
Ooh, I think I mentioned that I studied fine art growing up. And when I do two-dimensional art, 95% of the time I'm drawing people. I'm drawing individuals. I'm drawing faces. I'm drawing hands. I think I have always been drawn to individuals, and I firmly believe that video is a mirror. It's a mirror. And oftentimes people don't get to see the scope of who they are in their world. They don't see how impactful their boring run-of-the-mill business is until they hear the impact. And I think that's a big part of my approach is letting these tech titans, these engineers, the computer programmers. My favorite thing is when we come on site, whether we're getting B-roll, just action shots of here's this office, here's this law practice, to go in and then celebrate these people that are often behind the scenes. I love that. And I think that I've always been drawn to, I'm an optimistic, enthusiastic person. If I'm involved with something, I want it to be better than before I got there. So I love if I have an opportunity to work with an introverted programmer who is literally running out of the shots because he's so in his head. My favorite thing is just getting people comfortable so that being on camera is one, in the moment, it feels really fun and it feels safe and it also feels cool, like getting to celebrate your camaraderie with your coworkers. I love that. Our favorite thing whenever we're shooting B-roll with a group of programmers is we're like, okay, guys, I'm gonna have you talk. You're gonna talk to Justin here, and I want you to look at this computer screen and tell me just how many beers do you need to problem solve this? Is it a lager or an IPA? And just getting people to play and crack up and be goofy. But what happens is their demeanor opens up and the nerves shake off. So I love highlighting people's intrinsic joy, and I love getting to lean into, especially people that shy away from the camera, to create a safe environment where they can see themselves afterwards and be proud of who they are in an organization and the work that they're doing in that chapter of life. I love that.
It's so interesting because this podcast is called Peak Performance. And there's a difference between being a peak performer, being able to do it for yourself, and somebody who can do it for others, who can make others perform. What you were just talking about is allowing a regular Joe person behind a computer form in front of a camera, right? In a way, not only are you peak performer on your own because you know how to carry this camera and tell a story, but you're able to bring that out of somebody else. And that's very rare.
It takes a lot of energy, and there's certain projects that at the end of them, I have nothing left in the tank, and it is a bit of a collapse afterwards. But now I have better rituals to understand how to refill my cup because it is, without saying the words holding space, it is a lot of facilitating how other people are experiencing the moment. It's a lot of empathy, and especially for administrators, people that are also helping produce, to be sure they feel taken care of versus spread thin. It's multi-layered because I also want my team to have what they need to, like one of my favorite DP, director of photography, he's an absolute perfectionist. And that's why I love to book him out for bigger campaigns, because he will take 45 minutes to get the lighting for a set perfect. And I want him to feel supported and that I factor in his work style for the itinerary, and also not hold up time for other people to be prepared to get their work they have done for the rest of the day. So it's a lot of moving parts for everybody to shine.
Because at the end of the day, essentially what you are and who you are is a giver. And when you're giving so much of yourself, run a team, when you're giving so much of yourself for a client that has hired you, a lot of times they don't even know what you're doing. They don't understand the amount of effort you're putting in. They are not understanding the nuances of the way you're doing things, or the cheerfulness that you're bringing, or the strategy you're bringing. It goes invisible. So it makes sense that sometimes, maybe perhaps at the end of a project, you feel a little bit drained.
This is true.
So let's talk about that. Let's go back to talking about Shelby, the person, right? You come back to Austin from this experience of making a movie and enjoying and having a launch party, and then everybody's looking at it. And you come back and you say, okay, what am I going to do? And you decide, okay, I'm going to do something in this space, right? As a beginning entrepreneur, everybody listening to this, we all have been there moment. There's so many, am I going to be able to do this? Am I good enough to do this? Is this going to pan out? Am I going to be able to pay my rent? Practical problems. Like, I need money to eat, right?
Yes.
How did you work through these problems, and what were the next couple of steps in building up your business?
Yes, that was arguably the hardest phase of my business. Was coming, I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. So I had moved to a different city I'd never lived in, a market I'd never been in, and a skill I was promoting that I had no verifiable proof that I could really advocate with. It was exhausting, and I will say the first 2 years were pretty brutal. When I, the individual, I didn't have a team then, it was just Shelby. When I moved to Charleston, I just thought I would go for filming weddings. I had a mentor in the Virgin Islands, and he helped me second shoot, or gave me the opportunity to second shoot with him. So when I came back to the US, I said, okay, well, let's do weddings. We can do that. And I had no idea how to build a website, all of the baseline things, build a business card. And my first client of weddings that was under my portfolio, I think I'd mentioned this to you, it was a nudist wedding in the Caribbean. So my whole portfolio was naked people I could not use in the US. So I had an ad on Craigslist. This is 11 years ago, where Craigslist was still a place you could find vendors. And I just had the most sad $1,000 film your wedding, this ad. And this one sweet father of a bride took me up on it and threw me a bone and gave me a chance. And so $1,000, I did the best job I could possibly do. It was an 8-hour day, and the footage is horrible. It is so cringeworthy, but it got my foot in the door and it got me started. But the practicals of, as I began building a portfolio I can actually show people, it was really tough because I came in from the Caribbean. I had a certain amount in savings and I was living off of my savings. I was investing because I went from shooting with GoPros. I went from the micro camera to, my mentor kept saying, Shelby, you're better than the GoPro. You're better than the GoPro. Get a DSLR, please. And so I went backwards from action cameras to learning the components of real cinematography, real photography, being able to dive into ISO, shutter speed, like the true art of it, rather than just point and shoot. So I had worked backwards, and there were a lot of times I felt very hopeless. I felt really, I'm in a new city. I didn't have a social community. I didn't have a business network yet. And it was a lot of showing up to wedding vendor meetups and these places that I was so uncomfortable going to, but just trying to become relevant. It was exhausting, and my pricing was bottom of the barrel. So I'm fighting left and right for scraps of the industry because I didn't understand anything on value proposition, positioning, and even the theory of when you target the bottom of the barrel, that can be some of the hardest places to build a niche. So there was a lot of learning.
Some of the phrases that you use, some of the words that you use to describe your journey and yourself, like I said earlier, it paints such a picture. And the phrase that you use, trying to be relevant. Isn't that the story of every entrepreneur when you get started? You're a little, nobody cares about you. You look at
Yeah.
all the big fish in the ocean,
Yeah.
and you're just trying to be relevant. You're just trying to do what you can. But there's a big difference between you and some entrepreneurs that I come across. You didn't quit. 11 years later, you are where you are. Some quit. Some take the easy way out. Why didn't you quit? Is it just that you wanted a sense of independence? Is it just that you were passionate about this? What was the real reason that you persevered as that single girl in a new city, not knowing anybody, and still continuing to push?
I wanted autonomy. Autonomy was a word I can look at all of my 20s. That was the biggest priority. I wanted to have autonomy with how I made money, to have the opportunity to have a skill that in theory I could do from anywhere, with video editing being 85% of video production, because I did have a handful of sharks that the moment I started building momentum, the moment my seasons, the wedding seasons began filling out, there were a lot of people that noticed and would come up to me and say, "Hey, what's your vision? I can offer you stability if you subcontract and white label what you're doing under my brand, and you can have a full schedule. Doesn't that sound nice? Doesn't security sound nice?" And I think that I didn't stop because I knew I could do something really well. And I knew I could do it in a way that no one else could emulate. And it took me a few years to crack the shell of just taking this niche of event videography and weddings. Everyone did the cookie cutter, piano music, super sappy love story, and had people staged and styled for 8 hours. People would just pose, couples who are spending an absorbent amount of money to throw a party with their friends. And I would just see the day get hijacked by shot lists, and it made it sterile. So I had a moment in 2018 after reading The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, where he was describing what is your art? What is your way to be of service in the world? And I realized in that market, it was saturated, stuffy, and boring, and you could get a dime a dozen people that would cut a wedding video to very cheesy, boring piano music. So I took a leap and was like, I don't like these types of videos. What I would want is some Troy Boy. I just want high energy. I want bass. I want a little bit of trap music. Like, when people pay so much to have these elaborate celebrations, shouldn't it feel like you're at a party? So I started making these different forms of stories that were, some people have likened them to being on drugs. Again, coming back to my adolescence of where is this coming from? But it was the imagination opening up, and it was something that was novel, and it doesn't just retell a story, it immerses you into a feeling. And that's where I found my stride in being able to offer something unique and not settle for working for someone else, white labeling, and going with the security of someone else can fight the hard fights, because sales scared the snot out of me. And going through the learning curves of setting up my sales calls, my onboarding process with my clients, it almost made me want to tap out. It almost made me, I would rather take half of the pay cut to just not have to be in the tension of the calls. So it was staying in the tension to develop those skills and then build ease in places that I was either atrophied from not being in a B2C space for a really long time, to go from Caribbean living on a sailboat to sales calls. Oh my gosh.
What a story. I'm still trying to understand you because there's so many layers to you. There's a difference between having a creative thought and having a creative thought and be able to take action. Because a lot of people can't. And having a creative thought, being able to take action, worried that your client may not understand what the heck you're doing, right? And that's the reason sometimes some of your other competitors in this space, for example, are not able to take that bold step. Maybe I won't be understood. Maybe I will be criticized. Maybe I will get fired. I will have a bad name. Everybody will think this is the girl who's always apparently on drugs, right? And those are detractors. Those are detractors towards you being able to be who you truly are meant to be and doing the work that you love to do. That's how everybody is. They end up being vanilla, but that's how everybody is. How did you choose to not be that? Because looking back at it, it's a very romantic story. But the reality of the times are that you need to pay rent, you need to pay bills, there's so much going on. How did you find that courage to say, this is who I am, this is what I want, this is what I'll make, and they're going to love it?
I think I had a lot of people in my world that thought I should offer something vanilla. I had someone in my life at the time, a significant other, that he didn't ever see the value in what I was offering. And just my ground zero people around me were like, the joke is that my father, when I make videos, when we do these brand campaigns, when we do these projects, and every now and then I say, hey, you should watch this, I think you'll like this story, his response is still to this day, wow, it almost looks like a professional did it. You're building a career and you have naysayers all around you, and for me that just becomes rocket fuel. I am one of those people, and I think it probably was from my upbringing, where if someone told me I could not do something, my response was, watch me. So I think that ability to persevere is something I've always carried. And when there is the ammo behind it of, oh, you're not going to be able to do that. When we launched our podcast in 2019, my team members were like, Shelby, we are so stacked with our workloads. There's no way that we should go after producing podcasts. We need to just ratchet down on SEO, pay per click. Like, excuse me, we don't need to be adding something that you want to be on camera and interviewing people. But I knew that the human element of, if I can spend 2 hours with very sought after people in different industries we were trying to have a foothold in, if they could just be held in the scope of what we do, that is the sales experience. And it was, I think we generated 45% of our revenue in 2019 from referrals from when we launched our podcast. And it gave us something that offered real value. So I think that ability to keep going when others say, oh, you can't make it, oh, you should just give up, why don't you work for someone else? There's just something in me at this point too, where it's like, I came this far, I can't turn back. Or just the fact that I love autonomy. I love how hard it is to govern and master myself. And I suppose I can reflect on how many times it would be a lot nicer to have someone else just tell me what to do. I'll just show up and collect a paycheck. And I also realized the things in my life that I value, which is control over my schedule and being able to take time and have moments when I need to recharge, to have that space. That is the richness of my life. So I think those were the things that, even when it gets really uncomfortable, it's recognizing the bigger context.
So this trait that you mentioned, like tell me that I can't do something and then watch me. Do you think this can be developed, or is this something that someone's born with?
Ooh, beautiful question. I think that when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, you find a way through. And I think so. Tension seeks resolution. A rubber band, if you pull it back, it's so bad wants you to let go. So many people don't want to get to the point of, in their life, when they feel tension, anxiety, panic, financial stress, they choose, instead of hanging in the tension and seeking resolution, of even enlisting your subconscious, trusting your ability to problem solve, trusting your ability to just stay clear-minded to find the solution, even if you don't know the answer yet. Oftentimes, in my experience, people numb out with drinking, drugs, a distracting relationship, just light your personal life on fire. And then suddenly, who cares if I don't have money? I've got a stalker now. Like, just, you name it, you can pick your poison of how you numb out. I think that when you get to a point where you see a part of your life and you can't stand the reality of what you've been living in, how you feel in your own skin, how you feel in the lack of being able to buy that flight to join that excursion you really wanted to do. If you stay with it long enough, you will find resolution, as long as you don't check out and numb out and lose that attention towards it. So I think it absolutely can be cultivated if you're hungry enough.
Once in a while, I'll read some quote and they're great quotes and they stick with me. Then once in a while, I'll come across somebody who defines that quote. There's a
Mm.
quote that says, we don't change things that we have learned to tolerate. And
Yes.
what you just said is the definition of that quote. You describe that living under that tension or not, and just learning not to give up, learning not to just accept it as a status quo and just being like, it is what it is, but being able to push yourself, stay obsessed, stay in that zone, continuing to drill forward for what is truly yours. That was fantastic. I love it. So, as a woman in business, some say it's easy, some say it's not. What's your experience?
I think being a woman in business is excellent. I highly recommend it. I think that when I first got started as a solopreneur, I can even give the reference of when I opened up offering event videography services in the Southeast. I reached out to any other video production companies to just introduce myself, offer to say, hey, if you ever need a second shooter, if you need someone that's in the same realm, I've got your back. Like just the reach out, collaborate over competition. I took that route, and there was only 5 production companies in Charleston at that time. And of those 5, they were all male run. And of that, there was just one individual that reached out to me and was willing to grab a coffee and was willing to just not share industry secrets or anything of that nature, just to be a kind person that's open to meeting somebody that's in the same niche. And I think that over and over, I mentioned the sharks. There's been so many sweet, ambitious males that have seen what the momentum I generate and think, oh, maybe I'll just slide in there. And maybe if she doesn't see the worth of what she's doing, I'll just carve a niche and put this fire out of my competitor and also get excellent service at a fraction of the cost and the markup 2x. So I just quickly recognized a little bit more of the chess game that is why someone reaches out and wants to have interest in your business, and reading between the lines a little bit more, but then learning how to use that to your advantage and use that to your strengths. I think that there are women owned video production companies. That's not really a huge part of our world. And I think that the joke is like every video production company you hire, it's a dude with a little 5 o'clock shadow. He's got a black trucker hat on, probably has glasses. It's the same look every time. He's got a hoodie, recent film he did, whatever. And I think that being a woman in business, there's a certain touch, there's a certain care that goes into how we produce stories, and the ability to, I think the difference for me because before I was on camera, before I was behind the camera, I was on camera. I commercial modeled in LA when I was very young. And to see the way male photographers, in my experience, would boss people around on set, be aggressive, be super direct, and not realize you have a model in front of you and 45 degrees and she's in some insane outfit and she's cold and shivering, and you're not seeing the human elements of just hit pause for a moment so she can relax her face and be like, you will get a better product. So I think that to be a woman in the production realm, empathy is a wonderful thing to be able to get better results, because you can put people at ease and you can read between the lines of what are the social dynamics happening as things are opening up, and how can you wield that to keep a positive momentum.
Every single part of your life story has taught you some lesson. And instead of just putting in a box and knowing this is what happened, you have carried with you every single day and utilized it to refine your offering. Now it makes sense why you are so passionate about making everybody you're shooting now feel relaxed, like the way you go about it. So it's interesting that the suffering that you went through, gave you certain wisdom that allow you to become a company of its own right in a very competitive space, but be still so unique. So there is definitely value in this. I'm just amazed at talking to you, because every time I peel the layer of the onion, there's another layer there. So I love it. Let's talk about your work. What are some of the current projects you're working on? Who is your ideal client? What type of work do you want to be able to get into that you haven't done yet?
Beautiful. The type of work that we're most recently focusing on this quarter is we are launching a masterclass for introverted male tech founders on the art of the on-camera interview. And the premise of that It's a brainchild that I have sat on for 4 years because as we broadened into the commercial space, as we got more into advertising, doing these full-fledged brand campaigns, what we realized is we could work with a marketing agency for 5 months, 6 months in ironing out the details of what's going to make this pack a punch. So much detail. And yet, no one would brief the founder or the CEO on what to wear, what are his talking points for the angle of what the scope of the project is, what are differentiating points, and the practicals down to, hey, be sure to bring some oil blotters, if just the basics of hair and makeup for men. So what we've realized is marketing agencies aren't going to tell size businesses what they need to do to prepare. The hair and makeup people, they're going to be in their lane, but they're not going to think of the way that something is delivered, the cadence. So there's all these little pieces of the pie that go unrecognized. And so this course is our offering to take the edge off of being on camera, give actual rituals, practices to calm your nerves down, and also to know how to speak in a better cadence that's going to hit harder, and to have a good time so that it doesn't become this horrible thing. And I think there was an experience we had with an amazing creative designer in the design realm, can build things from the ground up, multi-story, just incredible world that this person lives in. They hired us to do a brand campaign. We're in the pre-production phase. In the middle of that, their PR agency said, oh, let's do some Instagram reels. They threw the founder in front of their iPhone and start grilling them with questions. That experience for this real, like legitimately a genius founder, that got completely blindsided by this interrogation on the spot, not prepared, didn't have their talking points. That person never wanted to get on the camera again, and they ultimately walked away from our scope because someone in a lateral agency of a PR person thought, oh, it's no big deal. And it was just like production drunk driving for people that maybe you are high output, but socially, maybe you're an introvert, maybe you process things at a different speed, maybe you need to have some care leading up to that experience. So those experiences of abrasive lack of care leading up to production, it breaks my heart because I have heard over and over these horror stories of people, there's a reason people get camera shy, and it's often because the person behind the camera did not facilitate an experience for them to relax. And it's something I'm very passionate about because I think something that I always remember, and I always teach new employees, is no one will remember everything that you said, but they will always remember the way that you made them feel. And of course, I'm butchering that statement, but it's not about what you say, it's how you say it. And it's the same thing. It's not about what you shoot, it's how you shoot it. Because someone's going to remember if they were strained and stressed out, and the person behind the camera kept getting frustrated and looking at their assistant going, can you believe this? How many retakes do we have to do? And it's just really humiliating. So I'm very passionate at launching this on-camera course for my tech titan introverted wizards of the technology world, where I'm like, I have no idea how to do what you do, the languages, know how to code in, the way you process data. I can't touch that. But on the inverse, here's how I can support taking very technical projects and making them make sense in 15 seconds to the general public. So that's my wheelhouse that I love to work in. The art of the interview is huge. And our bread and butter is mid-sized businesses that perhaps they have a marketing director, but they don't have in-house camera, photo, video, routinely planned content releases. We come to the table with fractional creative director offerings. So if your marketing director is balancing all the different worlds that you are promoting, conveying your brand story, but it's out of their scope and they just keep hiring one-off photographers, one-off videographers, and every time that you shoot something, it looks inconsistent. It's a pain to deal with new personalities. Our bread and butter is we become integrated into your marketing suite. That's the best way to describe our service is long-term relationships that grow with where your business is going versus static contracts of, oh, we only used to do this or now you're wanting this. So we'll go from unboxing videos, introducing new products into legacy oriented films where those original, we have a client we started filming 5 years ago, and we're now doing short form narratives of the key people in their organization and how they got into the seats where they are, and building something that shows a very deep dive into the organization as they've scaled, as they've found success. So our thing is taking the visual part of marketing off of your team's plate so everyone can be in their seat of genius.
Love it. And when you're talking about mastering how to be in front of a camera, this master class that you're releasing, it can also be useful for giving talks. Like a lot of talks are on Zoom or big interviews. So basically, anything that requires one to be in front of a camera, not just necessarily in terms of a production environment, how to relax, how to look a certain way, how to bring your best version together.
Yes, yes. And the joke's always right now, this looks like a bit, I have a giant shoebox underneath my computer, right? And those little things that go from you having a double chin and looking a certain way to, oh my gosh, how did I just level up my next Zoom call? Yes, all the practicals, because we are living in this age where every marketing conference since 2018 has been saying video content, need more engagement, show your face, show people want authenticity. So this is such a crucial thing for all of us having to turn on our cameras and having to have this experience.
No, I love it, Shelby. It is such an honor and a privilege to meet you because you're a mover and shaker. Your life is a testament to the statement that we should just not bow down to the practicalities of life. I think everybody starts out as a dreamer when we were a kid, and as we adult, we just learn to become more practical. And for some of us, with the fire within us, that just means becoming vanilla. But keeping that fire alive is hard because you have to face realities of life, bills, and what are people going to think, and some of the challenges that you mentioned of being in a specific industry or a niche. The fact that you fought, the fact that you persevered, the fact that 11 years later, you are where you are, working with all these companies, creating all this content, and still staying uniquely true to your own voice. It's a story worth sharing. So thank you so much for being on the show. It was great talking to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for facilitating and asking such beautiful questions.